How to resolve conflict in a marriage. Welcome to this video. We'll be discussing healthy approaches to dealing with conflict in a marriage. So what most couples probably do is when there's a problem, they get triggered and they tend to push each other's buttons and argue. What often happens if one spouse isn't happy with the other spouse, they might just have an argument, or they might try and do sabr and not say anything harsh or raise their voices, and it's praiseworthy to make an effort. But what they might find is they're just very irritable around that person now. So they're really irritable around their spouse and they can't do anything right. So for example, the wife's putting the dishes down, it's washing up and putting things away, and the husband's just criticizing everything she does. Well, what about this and what about that, and that doesn't go there and that doesn't go there. And she's just like, what's his problem, what's he going on about? And she's wondering what's going on. And it might be the other way around too. Maybe the wife's very critical of every little thing the husband does. Why did you put your shoes there? Why are you sitting there? Why are you looking like that? Why are you calling them for? And it seems really petty, and the wife probably knows she's being petty. The husband knows he's been petty at times. And often, if there's deeper issues which they haven't resolved, they come up in day-to-day issues. But people don't recognize that. They just think, oh no, it really bothers my wife. The husband thinks, it really bothers my wife when I sit on this sofa or when I call that friend of mine. And it probably doesn't bother her at all, but she's irritated about something else. And unless we reflect and we consider there might be a deeper issue going on, we're not going to be able to solve that problem. And it can happen both ways. The wife maybe needs to reflect when she gets irritated. What is she really annoyed about? Is she really annoyed about her husband sitting on that sofa or calling that friend? Or is she annoyed about something bigger? That they have a disagreement or argument and there's something deeper going on. She doesn't feel loved. She doesn't feel that he's got any time for her. She doesn't feel that he pays attention to her, for example. And the husband has got his own issues going on. Often intimacy is an issue. Maybe he doesn't feel respected. Maybe he doesn't feel like his wife prioritizes him. She's always running around after the children and he gets neglected. So there might be a lot of underlying issues going on and they just come out as petty issues. But what do we do? How do we resolve that? How do couples deal with the issues? Well, they need to sit down and talk about it. But what we need to avoid, what couples really need to avoid, is arguing in the heat of a moment. So the husband's sitting there, the wife's saying, why are you sitting on that sofa? Why are you calling that friend? And she's carrying on saying these things which don't bother her at all, by the way. Like we said, she's bothered about other things. And now he's like, what are you telling me that for? Why are you saying that? Why shouldn't I call them? I'm going to call them. Of course I'm going to call them. Why do you want me to sit? And they just start having an argument about it. And in the argument, they might not realize what's really going on. The wife herself doesn't know why she's so irritated with him. And he doesn't know. So they're arguing about these superficial things that no one really cares about. And in the moment of arguments, nothing really gets solved. And sometimes couples argue about the real issues too. They might argue about, well, you don't show me any respect, you don't show me any love, you don't give me attention. They might argue about intimacy. They might argue about finances. And in the moment, nothing really gets resolved. How many times have you argued with someone or argued with your spouse and ever resolved the issue? Most of the time, issues don't get resolved at that time. It just turns into a match, and an argumentative match, a shouting match, who can scream louder, who can say more abusive things. And then when things settle down, people might feel bad or even more angry. They might have another argument, or they might settle down and ponder and reflect. What I suggest couples do is try and be patient. So when your spouse is triggering and pushing your buttons, try and be patient. We've talked about grounding in other videos. So grounding means taking a moment, not getting caught up in that storm. You're noticing your spouse is pushing your buttons. They're saying things, they're doing things, and they're pushing your buttons. And you're noticing your buttons are getting pushed. I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling irritated. You might feel physical pressure in your chest, in your head. You might physically feel hot. You might feel that you really need to release this energy, and it might feel like the right thing to do to start shouting because it's what you're used to doing. But let's try a different way. So just step back and observe yourself, notice yourself, ground, push your feet to the ground, straighten up your back, just look around. And by changing your posture, your physiology changes. So as you're listening to this video, try sitting up, try smiling, and just notice making some physical changes can affect how you feel and make you feel different, make you feel maybe happier, maybe more empowered, maybe calmer, maybe more confident, just maybe more reflective. So change your posture. Often you see depressed people and their shoulders are down and they're looking down and they're feeling down and their face looks depressed. And happy, confident, grateful people, well, their shoulders might be straighter and they might look upright and they might look around and they might look brighter. Physiology does have an impact on how we feel, and the other way around, both ways. So just take a moment, take a breath, give yourself a bit of space from this emotional storm as your spouse is pushing your buttons. Give yourself a step, notice your breathing, just observe yourself, connect, remind yourself Allah Almighty is watching you. Remind yourself this life is very short. Remind yourself that we are accountable for our actions and everything that we say and do. And we are role models to our children, whether they're watching us right now or not. We're role models for them. And we want to show them a good character and how to behave. And we want to be good people. So just notice that, remind yourself, renew your commitment to the deen, renew your commitment to Allah Almighty, renew your commitment to the Sunnah, renew your commitment to yourself. And notice the situation. So just notice again that your spouse is triggering you, and it might just feel different this time. It might feel like, actually, just like water off a duck's back, it's okay if they're saying some things, it's actually not my issue. They themselves are upset or annoyed about something. Why am I taking on their baggage? Why am I taking on their issues? Why am I making it my problem? Actually, it's not my problem. It's actually their problem if they're annoyed and irritated about something right now. Hopefully we'll work through it together in the future. But right now, they're triggered and they're feeling emotional and irritated, and they're trying to make me feel like that. No, thank you. I'm okay. I'm actually in a state of remembrance of Allah Almighty. I'm in a state of taqwa. I'm in a state of self-development, and I'm okay. And just remind yourself that you're okay. Because when people push your buttons, it can feel threatening. It can stimulate your sympathetic nervous system. It can stimulate that fight or flight response when you feel threatened. And when you feel threatened, what do? We either run away from the problem or we fight. There's other responses, freezing or appeasing too, but the main ones are fight or flight. So we either run away from the situation or we fight back. Well, actually, there's another way to respond right now, and that's just switch off that alarm system. There is no threat, there is no dog chasing you around down the road. You can just relax, you're okay. Remember Allah Almighty and find that peace. Reconnect with yourself and just observe. And as your spouse is saying, oh, put that there and put that there, and okay, that's fine. I'll put that plate where you said, and I'll pop that spoon in that drawer like you said, and just carry on and just stay in your state of dhikr and let this time pass. And when things are cooler, when things are calmer, maybe you want to sit down and discuss things. I noticed that when we were in the kitchen before, something was irritating you. It just seemed like you're annoyed or irritated about something. And the husband might not realize what he was irritated about. And he might not even know, no, I was fine. Because he might not realize, a lot of people don't realize, but he might think about it and he might ponder and he might come back to you in a few days and actually, there was something I was annoyed about and it was actually something completely different. And just being able to talk through your issues. When one spouse is calm, the other spouse will respect them. That's what happens. No one wants to sit there pushing someone's buttons and they're coming out with, being in a calm state of dhikr. The other person feels a bit, well, out of place. I could say otherwise. They'll feel out of place, they feel a bit silly. So they're going to change. But what often happens is people feed each other's behavior. So the husband's pushing the wife's buttons, she's pushing his buttons, and it just feels normal. And it feels like we're all doing this, we're all in it together, and this is how we behave. I had a wife speak to me once, and she said her husband's always shouting and shouting, and he's always shouting at her and insulting her family and insulting her parents. And and it sounded terrible. And I said, well, when he's saying all those nasty things to you, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm shouting back at him and I'm abusing his parents. And I said, all right, well, what would happen if you didn't? What would happen if you just didn't say anything? Because if you have nothing good to say, be quiet. And that's an amazing piece of advice. You don't have to respond. This is a form of showing good character because we're connecting with Allah Almighty and we've got nothing good to say. We fear Him and we're just remaining quiet. So I said, what would happen if you remain quiet? And she said, well, he'd be quiet too. And that was almost like a light bulb moment. That sometimes we're trying to control our spouse by just doing back what they're doing to us. But does it work? Does it work? Is it Islamic? Is that the way you want to behave? Or is there a better way? And think about the character of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Think about his calmness. Think about his beautiful character. And we want to be like that. So next time you feel like a spouse is triggering you, it might be going into an argument, just remember the advice in this video, a quick summary, ground, reconnect, remind yourself of who you are, stretch, breathe, take a moment, notice yourself calmer, and just let the situation pass for that moment. And then later on, once the situation has resolved, sit down with your spouse and try and talk through it. Hope the video is helpful. If there's any questions, you can comment below. Do subscribe to my channel. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.